2020 camera resolutions. Let's talk about some features and the direction we want to see camera manufacturers take with future models. I don't have no tissues here. Here's a quick video where I've summarized some of the top features that a lot of people have suggested in forums, as well as some of my top wish list items that I want camera manufacturers to have with their next model of cameras. However, unlike other videos which focus on rumors or focus on unrealistic specs and Frankenstein combination of cameras that they wish they had, I'm actually going to take a more reasonable approach here and talk about things that I think would be easy for camera manufacturers to implement, but don't focus on specs that I think could take the camera to a whole new level. I'm not going to be focusing on any particular brand or camera. Instead, I'm just going to be looking at the mirrorless market overall. It was Panasonic in 2008 that introduced the first mirrorless camera. It was the Lumix DMC-G1. We've definitely come a long way in the past 12 years. And while each new camera usually comes with an improved processor or image sensor and usually delivers slightly better image quality compared to its predecessor, I'm noticing that the trend hasn't been focusing on some of the little details and finer features that would overall make the camera experience much better and could possibly help redefine how we use the camera and some of its implementations as well. Today's cameras with their current specs are more than enough for most people, and while they still offer a much better image quality compared to smaller, more compact cameras as well as mobile phones, a lot of people still opt for these other cameras due to their simplicity, ease of use. Especially something like this where you're filming yourself and you just want to turn it on and be able to create as quickly as possible. And while a lot of us who are investing in mirrorless cameras are looking for improved image sensors, better low light performance, improved codecs, and battery efficiency, not as much development is put into the ease of use and functionality of the camera itself. It would be great to have 6 and 8K become the standard for our current cameras. However, I'm predicting it won't be between another 2 or 3 years until it's actually more affordable. Before we can actually get there, we need to consider that some cameras are still being released without 4K and even 1080p 24 FPS being a standard. A lot of people have speculated that, especially with lower priced cameras with smaller margins like the Canons in question, are intentionally omitting these file formats, 24 FPS, because they don't want to pay the royalty associated with it. The camera market is becoming increasingly competitive, so I understand their desire to make lower priced cameras and still maintain a profit margin. Even though Canon later reversed this and eventually added it with a future update to some of their cameras, it's still unacceptable that features that have become essentially standard in a lot of high-end cameras for years was completely omitted in one of their newest cameras. 2020 and going forward, I think it's important that we add features, not remove them, especially ones as standard as 24 FPS. On the topic of omitting older features that were once standard on older cameras, let's talk about the flip-out screen. How is it that my Panasonic Lumix G7, a micro four thirds camera that I had maybe 5 years ago, had a fully articulating flip-out screen on a much smaller body, yet most flagships these days, with the exception of Canon, which was our culprit before, don't have a flip out. Some have flip up screens, some have slightly tilty screens. However, flip out screens are pretty much only found on micro four thirds cameras still. I found a lot of speculation on forums, reviews, and other publications talking about why flip out screens aren't found on newer cameras. Some, like myself, are thinking it has to do with patents on APS-C and full frame cameras, which are basically preventing other manufacturers aside from Canon for having flip-out screens. Others argue against it, but it would seem that with only micro four thirds cameras having it, why aren't the larger cameras also including this pretty useful feature? One of the most common things I've seen in both reviews as well as owners' forums for various cameras is the wish for a flip-out screen with the future models. So there's definitely demand there, and manufacturers probably know about this, and if there's a high enough demand for it, they can probably charge a premium for these flip-out screens. So one would think if they were able to do it, they would do it. Right now I'm using a field monitor to see what I'm recording, and it's definitely not as convenient as a flip-out screen. Even if it were mounted to the side, we're still running into the problem of a much bulkier setup. The field monitor is that big, it requires its own battery, I have to charge it, I have to pack it. So compared to a flip-out screen, if I don't need the other additional pros that, yes, a field monitor offers, a flip-out screen in general for most people is far more convenient than buying a totally separate screen. Forgetting about the cost itself, it's way less convenient than having something already built into your camera. And this brings me to my next point. Just like the Sony a6300, a6400, which lack audio in, and even my previously owned Fuji X-T30, which only had a 2.5 millimeter audio in jack. If the camera is a little bit bulkier but has these additional features which make it far more useful in the field, a lot of people are willing to sacrifice additional thinness and compactness if it means their camera is more usable. And then the next area of improvement that I think camera manufacturers should begin to put more focus on, aside from specs, is the actual user interface itself of the camera. While I think it's kind of far-fetched, I believe in the long run, we're probably going to see, similar to how we saw with earlier phones and car infotainment systems, they're all going to go the direction of either Apple or iOS ecosystems, where it's more unified and standardized between devices. Just like you have your Samsung, LGs, Motorola's, which were all in the beginning developing their own operating systems and running off of that, it eventually went the direction of, well, there's clearly one or two that's more superior than all these individual ones, so let's go ahead and stick with that. As a result, it's actually improved the usability of those devices because these manufacturers don't have to work, in addition to making great hardware, also great software. Leave the software to one or two companies which are specialized at it. I think cameras are going to take that direction down the line. It's much like having a phone with great hardware. If the software itself is lacking, that great hardware can't be fully utilized, or your user experience is just not going to be as great. With cameras, even though we're able to take great photos, unfortunately, a lot of user menu systems are either clunky, slow, hard to navigate, and as a result, you can miss a shot, or it's just difficult to actually delve into these deeper, more customized settings, either because the camera's systems lack it, or because it's just so hard to find or navigate to quickly when you need them. Likewise, the other downside to having all these different camera operating systems is it makes it more difficult for third-party accessories and hardware to be compatible with all these different cameras. This could include gimbals, sliders, and drones, just to name a few. Even within, say, the Fujifilm line, my X-H1 doesn't have the same software as the newer X-T3 and X-T30. So even looking at the Moza Aircross gimbal, which thanks to the latest Fujifilm software upgrades to those cameras I just mentioned, are now more compatible with features like focus pulling and zooming in and out. But with my Fuji X-H1, which came out a few years earlier, it didn't get that software upgrade. I still can't do that with my new gimbal. I think a more unified system would mean that your camera probably lasts longer as well, because you're getting more updates on a more frequent basis as well for a longer period of time. Unlike Fujifilm and other manufacturers, which after like 2 or 3 years stopped delivering updates because they have their newest camera. I think there's actually going to inevitably be more of a crossover hybrid between phones and cameras, where we are just actually using one device, which can then have lenses attached to it. We've kind of seen this with Motorola and their Moto mods, where they basically had an improved camera lens attached to the phone, allowing you to have more of a point and shoot kind of experience. That kind of flexibility and ease of use is going to become increasingly important in future years, where people are just relying on one single device. Our phones can already take great photos and videos. Granted, they're not as great in low light, but that's one of their main drawbacks right now. As soon as they catch up to the DSLRs and they can shoot as well in low light, there's going to be less demand for these kind of cameras. So they're going to either need to radically improve their quality, or like I said, they're going to need to catch up with software and ease of access. Finally, this ties in with the previous point of better software, but is actually far more achievable with future models, as well as just updating the software of current models. But can we please make wireless, Bluetooth, and USB tethering to our cameras more reliable, easier to use, and far more useful? How is it again that my old Xiaomi Yi action camera, as well as my Insta360 camera, as well as many other devices that come at a fraction and don't have nearly as good image quality as our big mirrorless DSLRs, have better connectivity? Both of those devices, as well as many others, make it extremely easy to pair to your smartphone so you can see what you're recording, change your settings, change your video and picture formats, as well as stop, record, and even sometimes edit the footage on the device. The Fuji Camera Go app, as well as many others that I've used for Sony and Panasonic, tend to be extremely lacking. Either they don't have many features, or actually setting up and pairing to your device is just a huge pain. In the case of Fujifilm's app, the biggest issue is that it takes forever to pair, and once you have a connection, it'll randomly drop out, causing me to have to go through a huge process again to repair it. Looking at forums, this is also one of the biggest complaints that a lot of people have. A smartphone is something that we all have on us and can act as a field monitor. This shoots 5.7K, easily connects to my phone, never has any issues for me. Likewise, how come with my Fujifilm I can't tether it USB to my Windows PC and get a live video feed? It doesn't seem camera brands are really placing much of a focus on that feature. This again supports my earlier argument where we have great hardware in our cameras already, but again they're held back by many of the software limitations and lack of development in certain key areas. May not seem significant until you need them. Again, if there was some kind of universal camera operating system, it doesn't even have to be by Apple or Google, we would probably get a better experience. I think a lot of these points here aren't really that crazy to be thinking about having and adding to future models, as well as with future software updates adding to previous models as well. Camera manufacturers might be focusing on the wrong things currently. While specs are a big reason why we choose one camera over the other, as well as why we decide to upgrade each year for some, I think camera manufacturers aren't developing fast enough with the actual core system that runs these cameras that would allow for a better experience. Likewise, with manufacturers fighting for competitive advantage and product differentiation, as well as possibly having to deal with patents, those might be the biggest things hurting us from getting smarter cameras now. I'm actually pretty satisfied with the hardware that I have now, but I know how much more usable and enjoyable the camera would be if it just had better software as well as a flip-out screen. That's it for this one. I'm curious to learn what you wish future camera models would have in the next few years, as well as the kind of realistic direction that you actually think camera manufacturers are going to take with the newer models. And where do you stand? Are you more interested in improved sensors, 6K, 8K, and all that? Or are you more interested in the smaller kind of upgrades that I've been mentioning, which could add to the usability and ease of use of your current hardware? Till the next one.